Welcome everybody to Tales from the Jar Side, the video series which goes through the newsletter that you probably don't feel like reading. At any rate, I'm happy to read it to you and let you know what's going on. And this time I actually have a couple of additional features that I forgot or didn't have room to include in the regular newsletter. My name is Ken Cousin. This is my newsletter that comes out every week from Cousin IT. Let me go through it now. Now, the title this week is Tales from the Jar Side, Delayed Validation in Mockito. That's the technical content this week. The DevNexus Conference, World Chess Championship, sort of. Elon throws another tantrum, and the regular assortment of tweets and toots. The subtitle this week is Best Sign Seen this week is the Lock Her Up crowd is freaking out about lock him up. See, pronouns do matter. I thought it was funny anyway. Welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of April 2nd through 9th, 2023. This week I taught the first week of my Android Developer Bootcamp on the O'Reilly Learning Platform. I also attended the DevNexus Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, which, by the way, is where I got this Test Containers t-shirt. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course viewers of, the video, this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. Hope you don't mind me saying that each week. It's still true. If you wish to become a jarhead, there's a subscribe button in the newsletter, and of course there's also a subscribe button on the video channel itself, on the YouTube channel. Let's glance at that one very quickly. See, here is the actual channel itself. Let's close that for the moment. And of course, I'm already subscribed and have already rung the bell, so I'm in there, but you're welcome to join me if you like. Okay. Starting with the technical content, this week I put out a video on Mockito talking about something that I had missed, that I didn't know when I was writing my book. So the technical content, the video is called Don't Verify That Mock Yet, and it's based on a tweet that I saw by, and I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, I hope I'm close, Maciej Walkowiak, who said, Mockito tip, use the verify method with a mock and a timeout to verify mock interactions that happen asynchronously. And he provided some code as well, but I didn't show that in the newsletter because I'm showing a slightly different version of the same code. He provided some code that suggested if you want to verify a method in a dependency has been called. Let me say that again. Mockito's all about providing mock instances of dependencies so that when you test a class and the class depends on certain other items, you can provide known answers for method calls on those dependencies. Now, in this case, the idea was to say, well, I want to verify that methods were called on the dependencies, but only after a timeout period, because you know for some reason or another it's going to take a little while before the class you're testing invokes those methods. So the timeout period, it turns out, in the Mockito API takes a delay in milliseconds. So this really is only appropriate or useful if you kind of know how long that delay is going to be. If it's truly an asynchronous system, there are other approaches and other libraries for this sort of thing. So in my demo, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, there's going to be a blog post about that on Medium. I added a method to a service that saves an entity into a repository. So the service will save an entity, but it's going to do it asynchronously. It's going to save the entity after a delay. The method in the service returns void, and this is a problem because methods that don't return anything are notoriously difficult to test. So one way you can, quote, test them is to use a mock and verify that the additional method did in fact get invoked. So in this case, I want to call some kind of save async method in the service and verify that it turned around and eventually called a save method on the repository. So here's the basic idea. The code is in the GitHub repository for the Mockito Made Clear book, and I've got a class called a person service that uses the person repository under the hood. And my method here called async save person takes a person, and I made the delay a parameter because I want to play with it, and used a completable future with the run async method to sleep for a certain delay and then call save. So the completable future.run async part is just to make sure that's running on a separate thread. So this is not, in fact, a synchronous call. This call, the async save person method, will return immediately to the caller and then eventually update with the results. Now, in this case, the save does return the person, but that's not being returned to the call from here. The return from async save person is void. So again, how am I going to test that? Well, here is a test. And I go through the whole discussion in the blog post, but here's the basic idea. I instantiate a person and make a delay and call that save. And then I call verify that on the repository, the save method was called with that argument, the person argument, but only after waiting twice as long as the delay. Now, I played around with the amount of the time you can wait, and it's, slightly longer than whatever the delay was. And how much slightly longer is probably very situational. Probably depends very much on what's going on. At any rate, it worked very nicely, and I was very appreciative of the blog. So all of those going over. The video's gotten over 100 views so far. It's actually done pretty well. Let's see, I think it's down at the bottom here. Yeah, 131 views at the moment. And for me, that's a lot. I don't have a lot of subscribers. Looks like I'm up to 172 now. So getting there. Got to get to 1,000, for monetization. Okay, now let's talk about the DevNexus Conference. DevNexus is a conference that is largely Java related that's held in Atlanta every year. I've been going for a lot of years. One thing that often happens at that conference is that the Null Pointers play, the band of Java developers that I'm a part of. And I do confess here in the newsletter, I'm not very good at taking pictures. I just didn't grow up with that as a habit because it wasn't as easy as it is now that you've got this wonderful camera with you 24/7 seemingly. At any rate, I know I should take more, but I just don't do that many. But we did have a little bit of a Null Pointers reunion because it turned out that 5 of the band members were there. I think all we were missing was a drummer, and there are a few others who were in and out. But at any rate, left to right, that is Paul and Gail Anderson, who teach, they made a nice presentation on Java FX, by the way, that I attended. Frank Greco in the middle here is a lead guitarist, and he kind of organizes the thing. He also runs the New York Java SIG. Paul and Gail are based in San Diego, incidentally. We got Freddie Gimme here, who used to run the Chicago area Java users group, but moved to Seattle for a job and now is active out there. He plays keyboards in the band. And then there's some heavyset guy with a funny hat. So that's me at the end. Okay. I attended, as I mentioned, a talk by Paul and Gail about deploying applications made with Java FX on the mobile devices. See, I periodically look at Java FX, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and I haven't been big in the desktop Java space. I mean, I learned Swing in the early days just so I could put a primitive user interface on my programs, and I keep meaning to go after Java FX, and I just don't have the motivation to spend a lot of time on it. There's not a huge amount of demand. It's a small but very noisy community. They don't like to be overlooked, the Java FX people, or I should say more generally the desktop Java people. At any rate, they have a way now using Gluon, that technology, to use Graal virtual machine to compile down to bytecodes for a particular platform, and they can even deploy directly to Android apps and to iOS apps. And after I got back from the conference, I spent an afternoon playing with that. I managed to get the Graal part working, which was not trivial, but I did get it to work. But in order to compile and run on Android, apparently I need a Linux box or a Linux virtual machine or something like that. And that's going to take a little bit more work. So again, it's still a lot of hoops, but it may be worth the time, especially if I can do this as an alternative to Android and still deployed not only to Android, but also to iOS. We'll have to see. At any rate, there's the Gluon link. Let me just open that just to give you an idea what we're talking about here. GluonHQ.com, next generation Java client for all these mechanisms, including cloud and, of course, native. So it's all free open source stuff that I'm using. So far, so good. Another thing I should mention, my friend Dan Vega, who does a lot in the Spring community, also gave a good talk with good old Nate Shuda. on the spring tips and tricks, some of which were new to me. It was nice enough to share his slides with me, and I was taking a look at some of that. And Dan's a developer advocate for Swing now. I mean, he works for VMware, just like Nate does too. So he was a booth babe, if you will. He hung out at the VMware booth, the Spring booth. We talked for a while. The funny part is that just out of frame on this picture is Nate Shuda. I mean, he's there talking to someone else. And of course, he sent me a message this morning saying, hey, what do you mean? My chopped liver, you left me out of the picture. Which we did, you know. I'm not good at taking pictures. I should have gotten a picture of Nate as well. Especially given the bright pink shirt he had on. That was dramatic. So I should have gotten that, but I didn't. Anyway, hi, Dan. Hope you have glad to see your picture in there. Frank, by the way, gave a talk on pattern matching, and he used some of these libraries like ChatGPT, and he's been working in that area for a while. He's a co-author on a specification that allows you to access machine learning algorithms in Java. And in fact, the spec is specifically involved with are ones involving visual recognition, like the ones that look at images and identify, yes, this is a dog, no, that is not a dog, or things like that. And it's working its way through the system and should be quite interesting. But he also used ChatGPT to generate stuff, and there were a lot of discussions. That led to the joke that I forgot to give him before he went up there, and I had lunch with him. I could have given him the joke before he went up to give the talk, and I forgot. The one ChatGPT joke I have is this one. ChatGPT walks into a bar, bartender says, what do you have? And ChatGPT says, what's everyone else having? Because that's what they do. All those machine learning algorithms are matching patterns. Whatever people are already doing, that's what it suggests. So, any rate, I forgot. There you go. There's your rim shot. And of course, it's set up using the wrong speakers and everything, isn't it? Oh, well, I had to reboot. My webcam wasn't working properly when I plugged it back in. Okay. I know what you're thinking. Maybe it's better off. Maybe Frank's better off I didn't give him the gag ahead of time. I went to a handful of other talks. It was a good one on functional Kotlin. I thought I knew that stuff, but he actually got into a little bit about monads, which, you know, the cliche about monads is that if you can learn how to explain monads, you lose the ability to understand them and vice versa. So he knew monads and was concerned he wouldn't be able to explain them anymore. But I thought he did a really nice job. And even though it was a little vague because he's pressed for time, I thought it was quite well done. I also taught the Out Android class Wednesday evening, which was disappointing because there was a neat event I wanted to go to. But the class was fun, except I had to deal with my hotel Wi-Fi. Other than that, it was all right. The reason I was there without a talk is I just didn't get my act together to send in any proposals, even assuming they would have been accepted. Next year, I'll take care of that. I look forward to going back. And of course, as I mentioned, the hardest part is that there's a new Ted Lasso episode Wednesday night, and I couldn't watch it, partly because I had a class and partly because I have to wait till I get home so my wife can watch it with me. I mean, that's important. So. Next section. This one's called Chess World Championship, or is it? This week, actually, it was Saturday to be specific. So today is Monday the 10th. So on Saturday the 8th, the World Championship chess match between Yan Nepomniachtchi from Russia and Ding Liren from China began. It's supposedly for the World Championship with standard time controls, 2 hours for the first 40 moves, an hour added for the next 20, then 30 minutes for the rest of the game with a 30-minute increment added after move 60. The thing is, though, is everybody knows who the real world champion is. It's the best player in the world who has been the best player for at least a decade. That's Magnus Carlsen. And he just got tired of this championship cycle happening every 2 years, and it's an incredible amount of work, an incredible amount of stress, and he'd already beaten everybody worried about, and he just decided, you know what, I'm not doing it again. So he kind of stepped down. Now, people are comparing it to when Bobby Fischer refused to defend his title back in 1975, but Fischer gave up chess entirely. I mean, he walked away from the game and everything. And as we later found out, that guy went off the deep end. He was psychotic. It was a real mess. But this one, I mean, Magnus is still playing all the time and will continue to do so. So, yeah, I mean, I'll keep track of the World Championship and I'll watch the reviews and everything. but they're playing for second. I mean, they can call themselves world champion and people will treat them with the title, but we all know that Magnus is the best. So we'll see how that plays out. Any rate, New York Times had an article and I was able to use it as a gift article. You can see the link here is a world chess championship without the world's best player. And they talk about interesting features and everything. There's a picture of Magnus as well. And let's see, was there anything else in there? A couple of other items. Like here they mentioned, there was a picture, by the way. There's Nepo, as they call him, although that's not a great picture of him. And Ding Liren, and there's Anish Giri wandering by in the background. So Nepo's from Russia. He has criticized the war in Ukraine, but he can't really say too much. He still lives in Russia and everything. So we'll see. He's playing under a FIDE flag. That's FIDE is the international chess organization that runs all of this stuff. And his past comments suggest he might say more, but he's not going to do it now. Ding is from China, and the reigning women's world champion, Zhu Wenjun, is also Chinese. So it'd be interesting that in a country that doesn't value chess the way many other countries do, it was introduced relatively late. It was not favored by the government for many, many years. It'd be interesting. Both world champions could wind up being from there. Although not after today, that's not looking as likely, which I'll get to. At any rate, should be a good match. Both players are excellent and evenly matched, and I have no idea what will happen. As it turned out, the first game was a very tense affair with Nepo having an advantage they couldn't convert, and that was a draw. And then today's game actually was a risky one where Ding did a very innovative line and tried some risky stuff, and Nepo got on the attack and beat him very badly. So Nepo is up 1.5 to a half right now. He's got a 1-game lead in the 14-game match, so we'll see how it goes. Carlsen beat Nepo a couple of years ago. It was very tight for about 6 games, and then he won, I think it was game 6, and then Nepo kind of fell apart after that. I would have loved to see him play Ding, but so be it. Garry Kasparov, one of the best players ever, said, "I can hardly call it a world championship match." But at any rate, I think I've already made enough out of that. You could read the quote if you're interested. But I liked it when they asked Magnus, they asked Carlsen on who he thinks or hopes will become world champion, and his response was, "I don't care." And I actually kind of believe him. I think he really means that. But anyway, we'll see how that plays out later. Speaking of Magnus, he played in the so-called Chessable Masters, which is one of those rapid play tournaments that has been all the rage over the past few years, especially during the pandemic. And it had a winner's bracket and a loser's bracket. So once you lose, it's double elimination. You get to play in the loser's bracket. And he did lose in the first round, surprisingly, and then won the loser's bracket to get back into the title match against Hikaru Nakamura. And we have this picture of how he crashed out of the final tournament as world champion with a hilarious blunder. I don't think hilarious is the right word. It was a mouse slip. I mean, he dropped the queen earlier than he meant to drop it, and therefore got taken right away, and it was over. And Hikaru was very happy that this lucky break went in his favor. Okay. All right. Good enough. Let's move on to the next section. So this one's called Elon Throws a Tantrum Again. So I got an email from Substack because, as you may be aware, my Tales from the Jar Side newsletter is hosted on Substack. And they put up a post about their upcoming product, which they are calling Notes. And here's the link to that, Unlocking the Power of the Subscription Network. And it vaguely resembles some social media places where you put in text or images. In other words, it kind of resembles Twitter. And that's the idea, short form content recommending anything, although there's no definition about what the character limit's going to be or anything like that. And there's no mention of when this is going to be available, although I've heard some people are already in the beta, playing with it. I don't know that I was even remotely interested in it, but one person who did not react well was Elon Musk. He viewed this as an attempt to try to destroy Twitter, which I don't know why he's worried about anybody else destroying it. He's doing a plenty good job all by himself doing that. At any rate, all of a sudden, and without any statement or warning, first of all, if you embedded a tweet in a Substack newsletter, it didn't work anymore. And I've been doing that for years, although last week you might have noticed all I did was paste in images of tweets. I didn't actually embed the tweet anymore. I didn't know about this coming, but I'd already switched my pattern there. Well, worse, if you tweeted a link on Twitter and it had the word Substack in it, then it got blocked entirely. And once people figured out, okay, well, I'll just use a link shortener, then those got blocked too. And then he got enough of a backlash that he, quote, backed down, and instead he showed this little beautiful exercise in passive aggression, saying this link may be unsafe. See, this is a Substack link. And says, this the link you're trying to access has been identified by Twitter or our partners as potentially spammy. Really? Who uses that word? Or unsafe. In accordance with Twitter's URL policy, it could be malicious or spammy again, or violent, or certain categories that are a violation of the Twitter rules. And you can ignore this warning and continue if you want, which of course what people were going to do is they're going to see this and go, you got to be kidding me. And after hearing about this happening on every Substack link, they'll just click continue. And by today, the Substack links are no longer blocked. I was able to post my newsletter. From what I understand, if you search for the term Substack, you get back the results of a search for the word newsletter. But that's it. Now, I found it interesting. Today I read the newsletter called Stratechery by Ben Thompson, which is one of the ways I keep up with the tech world. And he made the point that it's not at all surprising that Elon found this an existential threat, but Substack has their own issues as well. And he thought that from an open source point of view, obviously this is bad, but from a business point of view, he's surprised Twitter didn't cut them off even earlier, you know? So I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. It's hard when you are tied to particular platforms. My newsletter is on Substack, but as you know, I don't charge for it. So if I had to go somewhere else, it's not going to be the end of the world. I work with, even the video is on YouTube. Videos are on YouTube and they're not monetized either. So who knows? At any rate, there was an article in The Verge that talked about all this stuff going on, and you're welcome to take a look. I put a couple of links from The Verge discussing it. I like this tweet. Seth Abramson tends to be a bit of an alarmist, but it was pretty funny. And, you know, Elon is as big an a-hole as I've ever come across in my life, and I'm a Trump biographer, so that's a pretty bold statement. At any rate, the other stupid things that Elon did this week was, for example, labeling NPR, of all things, National Public Radio, as state-run media, like it was Russian television or something like that. And it's clear from his subsequent questions, he didn't know the difference between public-supported radio and state-run media. And of course, he's not blocking a lot of state-run media that he happens to support. So again, it was just stupid. And it just reminds me of the moment in Glass Onion, the Glass Onion movie that came out earlier, where, you know, Benoit Blanc points out that their stand-in for Elon Musk, that Miles Braun is an idiot. And he really is. He's incredibly stupid. I'm embarrassed that I ever thought highly of him, you know. At any rate, there was also another scandal going on involving Tesla this time, about Tesla employees sharing videos captured by cameras in customers' cars. I'm like, wow. Now, all I do in my car is drive. I mean, maybe you'd hear some loud singing, I suppose, but that's about the most embarrassing thing I can think of. But yeah, it's still, I don't even think about that, and that's bad. The responses range from Twitter employees who thought this was fine because we signed some license agreement giving away rights, and people who thought, yeah, this is kind of questionable, but we're still doing it anyway. Oh, well. Next section. Let's get into this week's tweets and toots. So I thought this was a pretty good joke. I don't know if I can do it now. If two witches watch two watches, which witch would watch which watch? Each witch would watch which watch belonged to which witch's wrist, which doesn't quite work. It's close, but it doesn't quite work on that last part. But all right, hey, clever. Now, one big event going on with Major League Baseball, with MLB, is that they've introduced a pitch clock this year, and I think that's a good thing. It's speeding up the pitchers, speeding up the hitters. They can't play around. There have been people called out on strikes because they wouldn't get into the box quickly enough. There have been balls called because a pitcher didn't throw early enough. At any rate, one of the things that was funny, though, is you're not even really supposed to be aware of the pitch clock. It's supposed to be something that the pitcher is aware of and the hitter maybe, but not the people at home. And yet Major League Baseball is considering selling advertising on the pitch clock, which you're not supposed to be aware of. I don't think the advertisers are going to be happy putting advertising on something that people don't see. So expect that to be visible. But Joe Sheehan, who's my favorite baseball writer and is, baseball writers do snark better than anyone, and Joe Sheehan's the best, said the pitcher's supposed to get the job done in 15 seconds, not you. Be Roman ready. Which, of course, is a reference to the erectile dysfunction product. I thought that was pretty clever. Anyway, that was why I included that tweet. On the title of Happy Arrestmas, I'm not really commenting on the arraignment of Trump this week, but I like this little tweet that said, Americans are so divided today. Half of us now call Trump's plane Perp Force One, and the other half call it Con Air. It's okay to have different views, people, which, again, I thought that was funny. This one, of course, is very nerdy, but I like it. I put the title, I should hang up my shirt's butt, and it says, no, Mom, it's not a messy pile of clothes on my chair. It's an L1 cache for fast random access to my frequently used clothes and order one time. It needs to be big to avoid expensive cache misses looking in my closet. I need to be minimizing latency. This is important to me, please. I get it. If you know, you know. Okay, under the title, That Would Do It, this tweet said, I helped a Nazi cover up their swastika tattoo today. Looking at it now, you'd never know it was there. Pretty wild what 6 feet of dirt can do. Yeah, I didn't see that coming. I thought that was pretty good. Talk about burying the lead, right? And now I need... There's my rim shot. Okay, here's a little life hack. This picture said, I've been using this as a water bottle for about a month now. I kind of love the judging eyes it gets me at the gym. And it's, of course, a Hershey's syrup bottle, which clearly she's replaced with water at this point. And just looks like she's drinking syrup right out of the bottle. Very clever. Very good. I would never be brave enough to do that, but I admire the idea. Then there was one on sequels. Finally, the best idea for a sequel I've seen all year is the image says Cocaine Bear the sequel, and it's got Fozzie Bear with a machine gun or whatever you want to call that particular gun. Cocaine Bear, Fozzie. I mean, yeah, the things would naturally go together, I'm afraid. And of course, that's really not a sequel to Cocaine Bear. It's a sequel to the Muppet movie, right? Have a great week, everybody. The video version of this newsletter will be on the YouTube channel, well, today. Now, as a special for those of you listening to the video, there were 2 things I forgot to add into the newsletter, and I was running long anyway. One was this, the Rock City Trash Pandas, which this is an article at The Athletic. The Rock City Trash Pandas, the minor league team, threw a combined no-hitter and lost 7-5. To the Chattanooga Lookouts. Seriously, they led 3-0 going into the 7th inning, and they gave up 7 runs without a hit. 7 runs. It was 6 walks and 3 hit by pitches. And it led to 7 runs. Then they scored 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th and still lost. This little tweet here, I think I have to click on it so you can see the whole thing. Look at the line score. 7 runs on 0 hits and 0 errors. That's nuts. That's insane. I love it. That was wonderful. So there's a backstory and there's an article and everything. I went to the article in The Athletic, but there's a lot of articles about it. Rocket City, I think I said Rock City. Rocket City is, I believe, the minor league affiliate of the Angels, I think. That fits. The other one I wanted to mention, which I forgot to put in the newsletter, was this absolutely gorgeous picture made by the James Webb Space Telescope on Uranus. Now, by the way, that planet has always been a problem to talk about out loud because it doesn't matter where you put the accent, it still sounds bad, no matter what you say. I always liked Isaac Asimov's idea, which was to pronounce it Uranus, because then it doesn't offend anybody and it still gets the point across. Regardless, this is a phenomenal picture. What an amazing picture showing the ring system that you could see, like, I think you could see like 9 of the 11 rings or something. And because it's so far tilted on its side, you actually can see the whole rings. I mean, how amazing is that? And then they included an additional picture down here showing many of the major moons, Miranda and Umbriel, Ariel, Titania, Oberon out here. Puck is in there, but I can't really see it. And these are all Shakespearean, right? From the Shakespeare's plays. But regardless, look at that. I mean, what a stunning picture. And apparently these were both done with like a 12-minute exposure one time from the James Webb Space Telescope. I mean, just the amazing promise of that thing is incredible. So at any rate, this is at nasa.gov, by the way, you can just Google it. I didn't get to put those in the newsletter, but I loved them. So by the fact that you're here watching the video, you get to hear about them. Last week, I did week 1 of the Android Development Bootcamp. So this week, I'll do week 2 of 3. I'm also teaching my Getting Started with Spring and Spring Boot course, which is a 2-day course. That's going to lead to a very unusual situation where I have a class on Wednesday from 8 a.m. to noon Eastern time. And then I have a class on Wednesday from 8 p.m. to midnight. So go figure. So it's going to be an interesting week. Well, I thank you very much for listening. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. You know the drill. And I will put up another technical video this week, and I will see you all again next Monday. Take care, everybody.